back to The Road Forward, a podcast for trucking industry leaders, brought to you by TruckSpy, the all-in-one fleet management platform built to empower your drivers to be compliant, productive, and safe. Almost got it. So we got our guest, Matt. How are you, sir?
I'm great. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. My name's Alex, but totally butchered the intro today. Flint's not joining us. He's busy in meetings or something. I don't know. The best time of the week to sit down, have some fun, record the podcast, and Flint's not joining. Darn it. That's okay. So we start the podcast, Matt, obviously with some memes, right? Okay. I found I know. Okay. I know, Matt, you were on the road, so this might not be super funny to you. But I was on the road, and this is really funny to me.
What does on the road mean? Let's define that, like, real quick. Just because, I was a commercial driver. I didn't have a CDL, but I...
Over the road.
Okay,
like long haul. Okay. So
I was paid to drive once upon a time.
Okay. Right. So it looks like this is some kind of RGN or some kind of special trailer that can take taller loads. And the load that it's carrying is like a laundry basket, like a really big one with wheels. So it must be like some kind of car. But it says, when you ignored laundry for 2 whole weeks and finally have to deal with it.
Hey, funny? That's great. I mean, I applaud this gentleman for having 2 weeks worth of... He could get through 2 weeks, hopefully, with clean clothes. Right. He's on a 2-week rotation. I applaud you, sir. I think that's admirable.
Right.
You really got to see this picture to appreciate what's happening here with this.
It reminds me, isn't there like somebody built a cart, like a shopping cart that you can sit and drive in or something? And the same thing here. This it seems like this is one of those, like, it's just those really large, like, it's an item that you can drive in, but it's just in the shape of a laundry basket. That's all. So I thought that was kind of funny because I remember doing that on the road. It's like, darn, I haven't done laundry.
Strap? I can't see the straps on that.
There's probably chains underneath.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's chained. It looks like right there. We can, yeah. Okay.
This looks like it could be a little top heavy, I'm sure it's down there. I'm sure it's not going anywhere, as they would say.
Okay. Next one, we got a picture of a sleeping cat, and it says sleeping trucker. Earthquake, sleeping. Storm, sleeping. Gunshots, sleeping. Reefer stops working or reefer quits. Trucker wakes up. It's like, I mean, I guess I didn't drive reefers, but what were you saying?
I can only imagine, like the constant sense of awareness you probably have to have for that, right? Fortunately, I never had to deal with that either, right? I just had boxes of stuff that doesn't go bad. But right. I love this one. I saw this one on my trucker meme page too. It was funny. It was cute. It was cute.
Yeah. It's yeah. I know there's some memes that are like, okay, we're not doing that, so you gotta, the filter is like, what's kind of PG, we're not going for R-rated memes here.
Right.
Okay. And then Matt, as a proponent of safety, obviously, when you have statistics like, when you have statistics like this, okay, so it's like a truck driver standing in front of a trucker, says 27 years OTR, 4 million miles, and 7 pre-trip inspections. It's like, guys, just do your pre-trips inspections.
Oh man, so conflicted. First thing that came to mind when I saw this, just this second, was better to be lucky than good, right? I mean, that was the first expression that came to mind. I also just have some affinity for the old school. Even if it's not the way I would do things now, just something about just the way we used to be, just F it, just get her done.
Right.
There's still part of me that, sympathizes with that. But
right.
The professional side of me says, do your pre-trips. Got to.
Right.
Regulation. Yeah. This is good, though.
Yeah.
That one made me laugh. That's good.
That's good, man.
This is the kind of guy, so I used to have to do, training and safety meetings with line haul and, just these grizzled guys been driving for decades.
Uh-huh.
since longer than before I was even born, right? And I'm trying to do a safety message. That's that look with the crossed arms, just staring a hole through my soul. That's exactly
Right.
the look each one of them would give me when it's like, you have to keep a 4-second following distance. You can measure that by a fixed object on the road, and I'm trying to, 26-year-old kid trying to explain that to this guy, and he's just like, whatever, kid.
Right. You're going to teach me something new here? Okay. Do you understand?
Right.
I drove
Right.
all 48 states. Do you understand? The mountain highs and the valley lows or whatever. It's like, yeah. But I mean, like, but that doesn't mean just because they have a good track record, right? What's that? How does that? Yesterday's wins don't
Right.
something today's games, or what is that? A joke or analogy?
I think
So
I know what you're getting at with that, right? It's just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't happen in the future, right? You could just be counting down the days till you have that serious collision, rollover. Again,
right,
I'm not sure how to win that guy over. That guy pictured right there. I could say
right,
all this stuff till I'm blue in the face.
yeah, but the other thing is though, it could be the other driver's fault, right? Like some other driver could be keeping a bad following distance, and if you're keeping a good following distance, well, then you'll slow down in time. So it's like ultimately, it's just, yeah.
I mean, I don't know where we're
Stubbornness.
going with this. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know if we're talking about pre-trip inspections, but it's like we know that if you, and now we're going to get all serious about it, but it's like,
yeah,
if you have a collision, right? They'll comb through that truck. They'll see what your pre-trip inspections are like. They'll see what's actually going on with the mechanics of the vehicle.
mm-hmm.
So, right, and
Yeah.
if you're missing things, it could end up looking bad on you, even if you're not technically at fault for what transpired in the collision. So.
Right. Okay, I want to talk about right. So just a small discussion of drivers being stubborn sometimes, but that's okay. It's an educational moment. I want to talk about California becomes first government in the world to mandate electric trucks. First government in the world. Okay, and actually, it looks like because they needed the White House to approve this rule, because it exceeded the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA's requirements. And so the reason this is in the news right now is because California essentially outright banned, I believe, was it 2035? I think it said here in the article. I believe it was 2035. No, hold on, let me find it.
No, it's like half by 2035.
Yep, right here.
It should
fully electric by 2035. Yes, that is correct. Like to require all that
half of all heavy trucks to be fully electric.
Right.
In a state that can't, if it has a heat wave, cannot maintain its grid.
Matt, so the question becomes, right? I mean, obviously, I think you talked about some of the stuff the ATA president was discussing in front of Congress with like electrification. It seems
Chris
like
Spear is losing his mind over this, by the way. Yeah.
But it seems like they're just not taking logic into account. Like, granted, 2035 is a long time, right? I'm sure there's going to be huge improvements in technology, but at the end of the day, like a truck stays on the road for a long time, and it's like, I mean, hybrid isn't an option for semi trucks, which I don't understand why, but still, like, it's not like this is going to be. It doesn't seem like this is going to be an easy transition or an easy goal to achieve. And what are your thoughts on your state, Matthew? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, you said common sense or something. It just doesn't apply in California. They do things just based on basically like their ideology or agenda, like a very, very progressive. I'm going to just use like the clean language for all this. Very progressive agenda. And they just kind of do things based on that. It's like they don't think pragmatically or realistically. They just kind of pass these things because they feel good or because, that's what their ideology tells them to do. I mean, I know I'm totally just riffing like on personal opinion here, but I mean, Chris Spear and like the ATA is trying to push back on all this, and it's just going to make doing things harder. I don't think it's realistic in terms of where technology will be. 2035 might sound like a long time away, but it's really not, right? I mean, just think, 10 years ago, 2013 wasn't that much different than today, especially when you're considering like transportation technology. So, Yeah, I don't know where all this is going to go because I don't think it's really realistic. Um, so
Right.
what
And,
happens?
but-
I
and
mean,
And they brought up ATA President Chris Spear said by allowing, because this is the issue, right? The issue is because it oversteps the EPA. Is he said allowing California to overstep federal regulations, the EPA is handing over the keys as a national regulator. This isn't the United States of California. Ooh, good point. I mean, so like there's two issues. It seems like here.
yeah,
Not only is like
yeah,
it's essentially
Chris.
12 years. Yeah, yeah. Chris is your hero, Matt. Right? Like that's the role
Well,
model you look up to. Okay.
I
Uh,
mean, he's
the,
most of the time I agree with him. I think he's doing good things.
right. You got Buddha, you got Jesus, and you got Chris Spear.
Sure. And Flynn. Let's add Flynn
Oh,
to
hey,
that
Flynn's
list
joining us.
because Flynn's here too.
Right. So it's like twofold issues, right? So not only is the timeline, right? Because 2035, we're in 2023. Is that 12 years? Am I doing math right off the top of my head? I think 12 years, right?
Yeah.
So it's like it's a short timeline to electrify half of the trucks. That's number one. But two is well, the EPA just said, hey, any state can choose to do whatever it wants to do with its emissions, I guess, right? Kind of that's that can of worms that it opens. So that's tough. And I mean, not to mention like how many electric vehicles. There was another article I kind of was interested in. Like there's Tesla's recalling all the semi trucks because they seem to have an issue. All the Nikola trucks too seem to be somewhat problematic. So I don't know. I don't know. Technology has a lot of room for improvement before I think we can just switch
And
to
that's
it.
sold. So I don't. It's like, how do you? I mean, are they going to regulate how many vehicles are on the road that aren't electric? You know, it's kind of weird. But
Man, don't ask me about California. There's a damn good reason that I don't go to California, live in California, have zero interest in California. Matt, your state's nuts, man.
I don't. I have no idea why I'm here. I honestly don't. I mean, I really don't at this point.
Okay,
I mean,
that's fine.
It's not even that warm anymore.
We'll move on. Matt, you wanted to talk about looks like something about quotas.
Yeah, landline.media. So this caught my eye because something's got to be happening here. There's like something I agree with coming out of New York. Again, where I'm mostly from. So I went from New York to California. Just love living in insane states, I guess. But so a Democrat has sponsored a bill that would strengthen the quota penalty provisions. So I just thought this was interesting because it's trying to keep police officers from doing this whole quota thing, just trying to meet these quotas. So it's common sense type, something I'd agree with, right? Where the police officer should just be able to write a ticket based on whether he or she feels like the circumstances are appropriate, like it says here in this article, rather than trying to satisfy arbitrary quota requirements. I don't know what's going on. I haven't agreed with anything coming out of New York in a long time, but this would be something I'd appreciate. So hopefully Michael Gianaris, D Queens, good luck to you, sir. Godspeed in your efforts.
Right. Yeah. The title's New York, Oklahoma bills intend to end ticket quotas. And it's like, well, New York is that's in the Northeast, obviously. Oklahoma, that's like Middle America, you know. So it's like, wait, when does the East Coast and Middle America agree on certain things? I don't know, very rarely. But it's ticket quotas. It's it's one of those things where first is like they'll do something to not call it a quota, because right now most places don't have quotas now. They just call it something else. They call it like proof of work or something. I don't know, like something that they want to make sure officers are writing enough tickets because they got to pay for all the retirement officers, right? Like they at the end of the day, they do need the money to come in. And so it's like, well, when you have a bunch of officers retiring, all the young guns have to go write out a bunch of tickets to pay for all those retiring officers. Is that not how it works? So there isn't a quota per se, but they still have a minimum that they have to write out. Otherwise, they're going to go default on their retirement. Correct? Flint, maybe you could add to this, by the way.
I don't have a clue how. state
I
retirement.
don't-
Sorry, Alex.
I don't know if
as a
I don't know if
taxpayer,
they're-
I'm pretty sure I'm footing the
Yeah.
bill, but
I know the taxpayers are probably footing that. I don't think it's just dependent on a one-to-one transfer from ticket revenues to the pension funds, but
Right.
sounds like
Okay,
a little
fair,
bit of a
fair.
conspiracy theory. But hey, if I've learned anything over the last 3 years, I mean, I gotta if it's called a conspiracy theory, doesn't mean it's necessarily untrue. So
Right.
who knows? It could be onto something.
That's a fair point. Fair point. Yeah. So, and it looks like other states have done something like this too, right? Look, it says 22, Alabama and Virginia added new laws to address concerns about practices that force law enforcement officers to partake in ticket quotas. So look, I mean, certainly looks like the tide is headed that direction. I wonder if this would apply to maybe the commercial divisions too. Because sometimes you wonder, is the officer writing you up because he has a quota, or is he writing you up because it's actually that unsafe? So this is interesting, but
or
still,
because they don't like your
excellent
DOT
article.
number.
Yeah, right. He's having a bad day. There was coffee ran out or something. It's like officer writes you a ticket. It's like, yeah, that's rough. All right, we're sitting down with Peter, the founder and CEO of Dispatch Robot. How's it going, sir?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Very, very hard to reach you.
Okay, so if you're watching this and you're like, hold on, these two people look very similar. Okay, we're brothers. Okay, but the point remains the same: is if you are a company and you're building something cool, whether you're brother or not, we want to sit down and we talk to companies that are building something cool, helping trucking businesses, helping owner operators and fleet owners and fleet managers. And so that's the goal of this podcast. And so it just so happened that Peter is working on this really interesting problem. Okay, so first let's go through your backstory. What experience do you have in the trucking business?
But by the way, no favoritism. It took about 43 episodes. So, for anyone who thinks there's bias here.
Okay.
So my background is I ran a trucking company with other brother for about 6 years. And during that time, I already had programming experience prior to that. But during that time, it was just a focus on physical services and like really building the company. However, I still, would code at nights and weekends on our own internal problems. So there was just a bunch of custom code that I would write just to help dispatchers, automation, pipelines, things like that. And during that time, I just got so busy during the day of having to be a part of the dispatch pipeline where it's, you're working on a spot market. Spot market's really competitive for most small carriers. And I just kind of got sick and tired of the problem where I was like, if only I could just like automate the discovery part. Like if I didn't have to actually be at the computer looking at the load board, if it could just like find the best loads for me. And what started as kind of an idea and just hacking around to see if this could just work theoretically for ourselves, ended up becoming a really necessary product for our own company during that time. So that was the conception of the idea.
And so
inception.
And then the thought goes like, well, if we're struggling with this problem, which is like, we don't want to, it's not that you don't want to sit at your computer, but you don't want to be sitting there scrolling through dozens and dozens of bad loads. You just want the computer to tell you what's the good load out of this batch on this lane, right? Like that's kind of the goal. And so you don't want to be sitting there sorting through all this data manually. And so the thought was, hey, if we're struggling with this, other companies are probably struggling with this also, correct? That's kind of how the thought grew.
Actually, it was a little bit different. It was like, hey, we're the only company that has this. Let's see how big we can make our trucking company since we have this software platform that lets us find all these great loads. So that was the initial idea. But inevitably, it kind of ended up going to friends and family in the industry that I just had. And it was a really pretty crappy first version, honestly. I got to say, like, you have to use a completely separate window. And it would like physically interact with the page, like actually work. So you like if you were running like Dispatch Robot, you couldn't actually use the load board yourself. So it was really terrible. But the germ of the idea was there, and that is you don't have to look for your loads anymore, and that was neat. So I was working on it slowly for over 2 years, just on nights and weekends, and then in the beginning of the new year, I decided to go full time and just jump in and see if I can make something happen.
Right. And to what's that one quote, like, I don't know if it's Airbnb or something, like, if you're not embarrassed of your first version, it's like you shipped too late or something like that, right? What's that quote?
I think that's Reid Hoffman actually from
Oh,
LinkedIn.
okay, right. So
Yeah.
there you go. So that first version was rough, but the point remains the same, that it solves a problem. Now, what problem does it solve? What load boards does it work on? So it works on which load boards?
So currently, right now, DAT and Truck Stop, DAT Power and Truck Stop, which are the two most popular load boards for carriers. However, an interesting problem has risen up since I built this, which is more and more established brokerages are building their own load boards. So the potential idea could be here is not just automating, looking through the load boards. It would be to maybe aggregate and automate, and that is from if you look at problems exclusively from a customer perspective. It's good that all the load boards are trying to be competitive. Like that, I think that's inherently a good thing. But from the customer's perspective, the carrier, you now have to go through eight different tabs and duplicate the same search 8 times.
Right. Yeah.
Which arises to a customer-centric solution instead of maybe a market solution.
Right.
But
having six or seven tabs open on the 6 or 7, load boards that you use, that's a frustrating experience for sure. And so currently, though, it works with DAT and Truck Stop. So if you have a subscription over there, what do? You install this software? Like, where do you find us? What is the software?
So the technical way it works is it's a Chrome extension. So it works at the browser level. And then when you go to DAT or Truck Stop, the extension will load the software layer on top. So you would still use DAT the way you normally use. You just have basically the superhero pack unlocked. You're like Captain America, pre-injection versus post-injection, and then you come out and you got abs. So it gives abs essentially to the product. But it's really simple to use. Virtually no retraining of any kind is required. You would just use the load board the way you normally use, except now you have all this extra functionality just baked right into it.
Okay.
And we can probably get into what that extra functionality is and how it works and yada yada.
Right. So and so essentially, it's you install a Chrome extension, and if you're familiar with Chrome, then it's just a couple of clicks usually. So you install it, and then it starts to run on your load board and highlights the best load or something, or highlight. How does it show you what the best load is?
Yeah. So the way it's going to get your attention is it's going to literally pop out a window with the load details that it recommends on that lane. So for example, let's say you have a lane, there's like 500 results. You would click find loads. There's going to be an indicator showing you which search it's running on. And when it scans through all 500, it's going to determine 2 or 3 that it can recommend that are genuinely good loads and then pop them out. Now it's actually going to just do that all day long. So because the load boards are real time for anyone who uses them, new loads are always coming in, and usually there's a first mover advantage for these loads. So first caller typically will get it. So it's kind of it's convenient having Dispatch Robot always running. Where if you have to step away and run an errand for most small business owners, they're not always glued at their computer. It's interesting feedback from customers is a lot of people book loads after business hours. So they'll just leave Dispatch. This was not even something I even thought of when I initially built it, but they'll book loads at 7 p.m. That's never happened to me. Whereas who's working at 7 p.m.? It's obviously some shipment fell through or some carrier didn't show up and they had to repost it. And so since they have this automated, they just leave Dispatch Robot running. And at 7 p.m., they get an email and says oh, here's a good load. So it's been an interesting use case to learn from.
Right. But that's not even, that's been an interesting use case that you just found out about. But really the thing is not everyone has a triple monitor setup where they can see everything. So it's if you're working on one computer and you're just in your email, maybe you're typing up an email in response to a customer. Maybe you're opening your accounting software. You're at your computer. You're opening up your accounting software. You don't know a load could have just gotten posted and you didn't see it. With Dispatch Robot running on the load board, it would then pop up and show you, hey, this load just came out, and it will show you, and you're not, this way you can pause what you're doing and it'll get your attention so you can call immediately on it to help you with that first mover advantage on those loads, correct? That's the main situation, the main problem.
Exactly. It's if you could clone yourself and make yourself digital, and that digital you could always keep an eye on the load board. That's basically the ideal to strive for. Now, it's not perfect by any means in the sense that it's not this genius dispatcher that just knows everything, because with load boards, one of the big difficulties is the data is not accurate, or it's misrepresented on purpose. Where a broker might post, might post it as a full load to get attention, but it's actually a partial, and then you call and it's like paying $800.
Right.
And so that dispatch robot can't call the carrier and then like pretend to be a human and then be like, hey, I'm a robotic dispatcher. Could I get? It's like, if you could make an AI that does that, you probably just made something way more intelligent than just a dispatcher.
Right. But still, it identifies the load. You can quickly call on it, even if you're in another tab, or maybe you stepped away. You can turn on email notifications. Like that certainly has helped customers book loads at all times. And then from there, what other features are like really good? What else is baked into the product that that customers have said is really rewarding?
So a lot of the solutions were from a first user perspective. So running the trucking business, it was day-to-day things that just kind of happen naturally. And one of them would be instant routing. So as a dispatcher, when you're looking at any kind of shipment, you want to check where it is on a map. Granted, we all kind of maybe understand where Los Angeles is, Dallas, Texas, Houston, Texas, but there are obscure city names that you just like, where the heck is that relative to the state? And so by having a one-click Google Maps integration built in, it takes seconds to see what the route is for a potential load, instead of manually typing in, which takes minutes. And when you do that, 50 times a day, well, minutes definitely add up. Okay. And so it'll save you a bunch of time just on the mapping side of things. Also, a really common use cases, especially during COVID to like 2020 and 2021, this was more frequent, where brokers would only post their email as contact information, no phone number, because people are working from home. And, typing emails for every single load opportunity, what used to be a quick phone call now requires a 2-minute email. It's just like, man, how many load opportunities can you really react to? And so I built an email integration where you can just click on an email and it'll like pre-format like a response for you that you can edit if you need to, or you can just click send. And so it basically, the friction of an email became the friction of a phone call, which is a click. And so little things like that make it really advantageous. And then there's like other stuff where if you have like more than one dispatchers in your office, you can share loads with each other instantly.
Right. So maybe I'm on the phone with someone and you can just send it to the other dispatcher so they can call. Right. That's the use case there.
Yeah. Well, it's more like, if you're tied up and a good load comes out and you're, negotiating the phone, you're not going to be like, hey, Jim, check out this load. Where do you find it? Oh, it's on this search on this load board. Scroll down 400 rows, sorted by age. Like that's not going to happen. Versus here, you just like one click and it'll pop out on the computer.
Okay, nice. And to go back to the bad data problem, I also remember like that brokers would post like 48 pounds, like not 48,000. So it's like that was also super frustrating. So this has been a significant challenge, I don't want to say a massive undertaking, but this is an important problem to solve, which is the carrier experience on how they're essentially finding their freight, right? This has been an important problem.
Yeah, well, the motivation is more to really make great tools for carriers, because there's this asymmetry with solutions for the trucking industry. And because brokerages typically will have a higher margin than an asset-based carrier, most of the product and technology solutions go to brokerages, not carriers, because they just have more capital to spend on services and to try things. And being an asset-based carrier exclusively, never a broker, my motivation was exclusively to benefit the carrier, to make tools that only work for the carrier's favor. And so by, taking on the challenges of, figuring out broker lingo, like that 48-pound thing you mentioned, where, they'll put 48 pounds for the weight and they'll put 48, for the length, or vice versa. They'll put 48 for the length and like 100 pounds for the weight. And then it's like, is it actually 48 feet if it weighs 100 pounds? Like maybe, but most likely not. And so knowing how to deal with this noise, if you will, with the data to pop out those loads where it's like, this is most likely good, even though it's represented as bad, is a tricky problem. But since I was a carrier, I could tweak the program on myself day in and day out and see exactly if it works or not.
Well, this is it's cool. We're gonna, we'll have to keep tabs and see where it goes. It's gonna be really interesting to see what what carriers say. We'll leave a link in the description if you're interested. Peter, thank you so much, man. This was great.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that's gonna do it for this one. Let me know in the comments down below what you think, and we'll see you next week. Bye.